Hey free to play gang, welcome back to another tier list video. So if you do not already know why these Espers are here, you may refer to the previous tier list video link at the top for your convenience. But before we begin, if you find that you enjoyed this video or you found it helpful, consider subscribing. Subscribing is free and you can always change your mind afterwards. So without further ado, let's start with the changes. So update 3.0.0 brings about changes in 10 different Espers and a bunch of them are significantly improved, where some of them have a little bit of changes here and there, but generally across the board, they are all performing better. So we're going to start off, starting off with the net 5s and then the net 4s afterwards. And I'll try to make this as short and as sweet as possible. So we're going to start off this video first with Cecilia. So Cecilia has one main change, okay, and previously I rated her as a B, but I think now we're going to do a little bit better based on her changes. So right now, the Espers that she revived, or basically all the Espers in her team when she dies, will gain a 50% HP shield, and this would significantly improve the chances of you landing a counter cleave, or let's say if you're running a more tanky comp, this will allow your Espers to revive with a lot more HP and therefore become a little bit more dangerous. So previously being at a B, I don't think she still deserves this spot. She is definitely a lot more usable now. She may potentially go a little bit higher, but based on her new buff, I think she has a very strong chance of being a low S or a high A. So I think I'm going to chuck her at an A for now and see how she turns out to be based on other people's opinions about her. Now next we have Yuyao. Okay, so previously I put her at a C because I found her completely useless because of the changes done to the Astro Witchcraft Relic set. However, with her current changes, she becomes a lot more useful, and frankly, I use her in a lot of different content. I use her in all of my Temporal Tower runs, I use her in all of my Cube Miracle runs, and I practically use her in all of my PvP runs as well. Granted, she may not be so useful in some of the Ritual Miracles and the other PvE content, but I think where she is needed the most, such as the difficult content, she excels in, which means that she is no longer that useless, and in fact, she's still working pretty well with Astro Witchcraft, or at least, you know, the current version of Astro Witchcraft, which is basically just grant speed to your team whenever they are disabled. So from a C, this is very easy for me. I'm going to push her all the way up to an S rank. Very usable in almost all content, and especially the content that matters a lot. The only reason why she's not in a double S is because I feel like she can be improved a little bit in terms of like her healing. Her healing is not exactly that good, but the rest of her kit is pretty A-okay. Now next up we have Biondina. Okay, so previously I put her at a B because of the limited use that she has only in PvP. But the thing is, her changes increases her damage in her ability 1, and the changes also increase her damage of her ability 3, which is basically just a little bit more damage across the board, which makes her a little bit better for PvP, but not necessarily better for other content because she doesn't have the essential support or maybe like some kind of insane DPS that some of the other Espers have. So as such, being a niche Esper like that who is still remarkably strong for PvP, I'm still going to have to put her at a B tier. Nothing is going to change for her. She's just going to do a little bit more damage and that's about it. Now Alexa, so this is one of the Espers that I put quite high up in the A tier, but I think right now she has a major change in her second skill, and one of the reasons why I put her in A tier is because her second skill previously was an AoE strip that was pretty equivalent to that of Lucas over here. So this is Lucas. So she had a strip that was pretty equivalent to that, actually it's basically the same. But now, unfortunately, she has lost that strip, which means that she may not be that useful in PvP anymore, which is definitely not a good thing for her right now. And her second skill now just balances the HP of all of her allies, which is good against single target damage dealers. So she can be quite useful in Cube Miracles and maybe the Temporal Tower, but very limited use. So I think I'm actually going to drop her down to B tier or maybe even C tier. I don't really find her that useful anymore. If her second skill was a little bit more healy or like did something else apart from just balancing the HP of all Espers, like maybe if you give your whole team a defense buff at the same time or maybe a shield buff, then we could possibly be looking at a return to an A tier. If not, I think right now I'm just going to chuck her at a C tier. And next we have Falken. Okay, so previously he was from the C tier as well, similar to Yuyao, who's currently in the S tier. So now Falken has a massive change. Okay, so this is one of the changes that I really needed long ago. This was something that they kind of like promised, okay, the developers kind of promised, but it didn't come true. So right now when he deploys his debuffs, what happens is that when an enemy attacks any of your allies, you have a 60% chance of counter-attacking. So that means that potentially he can be quite useful in, let's say, Chronos and Apep, because when they attack, they always land AoE attacks, and therefore your entire team has a 60% chance of like counter-attacking, which can be quite useful in achieving some very safe or fast runs, but honestly it's not going to make your runs super fast. So I'm not going to be using Falken just because my team is already fast enough, and I don't think waiting for the boss to attack me is going to speed up any of my runs. But with that said, it's still going to be quite useful for some of the newer players who have not achieved faster timing. So previously from C, he's definitely not in C tier anymore. he's very useful right now. And I'm thinking of between A and S, but I think based on what he can do right now and a limited probability of just 60%, I think just an A tier for now. Let's see what he can do before I change my mind and probably raise him further up. And now next on the list, we have Djoser. Okay, so he was also previously a C tier. I'm basically being a necromancer right now. He's not going to be in C tier anymore. He has a very major change. So two of the big changes that Djoser has received is that right now when he obtains 10 Bull Rager stacks, he would then automatically gain a turn, which means that he can potentially steal turns, especially when up against enemies such as Gabrielle, who hits multiple times, against enemies such as Triki, who hit multiple times. He will quickly gain his turn very fast, so he does not even need to be built speedy. He can just gain a turn because your enemies are landing a ton of AoE attacks. So with him being able to cut in between your lineup just like that, he can drop his third skill, which is also improved, which is also the second reason why he's getting a bit stronger. His third skill is now a lot more powerful, and even though I have yet to test out the damage potential that he has, I can assume that based on Dona himself, Djoser could potentially be quite powerful and quite strong, but he is still going to be a one-trick pony, so I am still going to raise him up, but not significantly, so now he's going to go into A tier. I think he has quite a lot of potential, and we will see about that in the future. And following that, we have Louis. Okay, so previously Louis was in B tier because of his limited use to just Fafnir, but now that he has a lot of changes, so basically his second skill, which is also his passive, now makes him very useful in a lot of content because he can now do true damage in all of his attacks, which makes him rather strong. So I am finding more use for him, so I'm currently using him a lot more in Sonic Miracles, and I am also using him in some of my APEP runs, and he is able to achieve some rather fast timings for me because of his seer buffs and because of his true damage, and of course because of his bleeding. All of that added up makes him a very solid DPS. So I think previously being at B tier is a little bit harsh for him right now. I think he's slightly bumped up to A tier. He's not going to be like high A or anything like that. He's going to be quite useful, but also not unthinkably strong. Now, next up, Anesidora. Okay, so previously in one of my previous videos relating to the Esper changes, I had placed her in A, and I said that I'm not really going to change her position because I don't think anything really changes much for her. So basically now her third skill instantly gives her another turn, which allows her to use her second skill immediately and do like a little bit of damage, right? Just 50% of the enemy's HP sniped in one go, but it is still just 50%, which is not a huge deal in my opinion. However, there is one thing that they did that made me want to push her up to S tier, which is where she belongs to right now. And that's because now her third skill still has a 4 turns cooldown. So they did not actually increase the cooldown of the third skill to 5 turns, which effectively means that her third skill, instead of having a 4 turn cooldown, now only has a 3 turns cooldown, because when she used the third skill, she would instantly gain another turn, which would reduce the cooldown of her third skill. So with that, she becomes a lot more spammable and becomes a lot more powerful, and I think she has a lot of potential going into some of the harder content like Temporal Tower and the Cube Miracle. And to add, previously she was already really good in the Temporal Tower and the Cube Miracle. Now with this change, she becomes even much more better. Okay, and next up, this is Pritzker. So previously I put him in A tier, right? But he has a very massive change. Okay, so his current update changes his kit a lot. So now whenever he lands a single debuff, any Esper that is disabled will have their cooldowns increased by 1, which means that if he lands 2 debuffs, all of these disabled Espers are going to have their cooldowns increased by 2 turns, and if he lands 5 debuffs, all disabled Espers in the enemy's team are going to receive a 5-turn cooldown increase to all of their skills, which makes him significantly much scarier than before. And with that, he becomes so powerful in every single content in the game. Not even just PvP, he's also extremely powerful in Temporal Tower, he's extremely powerful in Cube Miracle, and he's not unusable in some of the Ritual Miracles. So from A, I think this would be one of the major changes for this update, and I think he's going to go straight into a double S tier. There is only one setback that he has, which is he relies on another Esper to move before him to not only strip buffs, but to also land some disable. So that is his only weakness. But the thing is, if you can achieve that really comfortably, he will become super powerful. He would completely nullify a lot of enemy teams. Now finally, Dhalia, who was previously sitting at B tier because all she really did was just a crit rate buff, which is not good, and an AP boost, which is rather decent. But right now, the game is deciding to give her an extra attack buff. So this change is a huge deal for Dhalia. She is now a lot more usable in a lot of content, because previously we may not always require a crit rate buff, but now we always do require an attack buff, and an attack buff with an AP boost is a major change. So I think from B tier, I'm going to ramp her up to like, I want to put in S tier, but it's kind of like overpacked right now, but I still feel that Dhalia is really strong right now. She is in a very good place, and her second skill also freezes for whatever reason. Like let's say in Temporal Tower, right, she can be at least a little bit useful there as well. Although in my opinion, I think the second skill is not so big of a change for her. It's just her third skill. But now it's time for some cleaning up, because now that I'm looking at this list again, there are some Espers that I don't really agree with myself that deserves to be in certain positions. So for example, one main change that I'm going to do is I'm going to push Triki up to double S. I think Triki is exceptionally powerful. And the more I use him, the more I feel like I cannot do without him. I use him in practically every single content except for Ritual Miracles, of course. Running him with the Zeus Relic set is really game changing, and his third skill can potentially stun a single target for 2 entire turns, so they just stay there for 2 entire turns. So he has been very clutch in a lot of different situations for me, and so he deserves that spot. And for Liling, I think after using him a little bit more, I feel like his damage potential is not as high as I thought that he could be. So I'm actually going to push him down to S tier. Not because he's terrible or anything like that, he is still really good. Now next up, I'm actually going to pull Berenice slightly lower because I feel like while she is quite niche and quite useful in some situations, she's not exactly that insane. She's really good for new players, of course, and she's quite good in Fafnir, but apart from these two scenarios, she's actually not that widely used, and I feel like you can't really use her in APET because of her multi-hits, and she's not very usable in Chronos because of her typing, so I think I may even push her down to a B tier. But I think she still has a little bit more use than some of the B tiers out there, so she's gonna stay in A tier for a while. And another change that I want to do is I want to move Hyde up to S tier. I think he is incredibly powerful right now. With his revive, not only can you avoid instant death by, let's say, cleave comps, but he becomes exceedingly annoying such that you don't really want to take him out at the start, but yet if you take him out last, he becomes extremely powerful. So that adds a little bit of complexity, especially in like PvP and of course many other content that he's very usable in. And not only that, he's useful in every single Ritual Miracle. Okay, maybe not so much in Chronos, but he's very good in Fafnir and APEP, which is some of the harder Ritual Miracles as well, so he definitely deserves a high S tier. And I think I want to push Tang Yun up to S tier as well, because I feel like his potential is pretty strong, especially in Temporal Tower. He has a lot of use over there, he can do a significant amount of damage, and he can stun as well, which is always a good thing. And another change I want to make right now is to move Celine down into A tier, because I feel like when I start to test her out, I realize that her sleep is not as useful as it seems. So there is a lot of potential for you to just break the enemy sleep by attacking them, especially if you're using Espers such as Gabrielle. You're gonna like force yourself to skip using your AoEs, which is the sole reason why Gabrielle is so useful in the first place. So she loses a lot of synergy with a lot of the Espers in the game, and therefore I think she don't really deserve the S tier, even though she is quite good on her own. And one final change that I want to make is to move Esena down. So recently I realized that I'm using her less and less, and that's for a very good reason. So in PvP, I'm not using her anymore because it's extremely easy to counter an Esena team. Just bring a bunch of AoE and you're just gonna remove all of that Lotus marks just like that. And also secondly, because she lacks a lot of healing potential, she only has like damage mitigation and you need to time it so perfectly well, she does not really excel in some of the content as much as she used to. So I'm just gonna move her down to A tier. I think she's still good, but she's losing a little bit of relevance. So I think I'm done with the current tier list, so this is what it looks like for me right now for at least the update 3.0.0. If they decide to change anything up in the Espers, I'm gonna have to reshuffle some of the Espers again. But as for now, I'm very happy with how this looks like. So if you agree or you disagree with anything in this video, don't forget to leave it down in the comments below so that I can read your opinions and definitely act on it. Or maybe sometimes, you know, I may not see the entire picture, but probably some players out there are able to give me a clearer idea of maybe some of the Espers here that I do not have enough experience using. But I guess I can end the video right here. If you enjoyed the video or you found it helpful, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more Dislyte content. And this has been free to play, by the way, and as always, I will see you in the next video.